And what I have in mind in particular with what Nietzsche has to say about Thucydides comes from Twilight of the Idols, and it's in the section entitled, What I Owe the Ancients. And let me emphasize, I'm not necessarily endorsing this interpretation, but it's extremely important because Nietzsche himself has recognized in Thucydides a fundamental alternative to the tradition going back to Plato. And one of the reasons that is so significant is that what it means is that in order for us to understand Nietzsche, and it is absolutely important that we understand Nietzsche because he's been so influential, but what Nietzsche is about to tell us is that for us to be able to truly understand him, we need to understand Thucydides. But let me emphasize that simply because I'm beginning with this example of Thucydides and Nietzsche, it could very well be the case that Nietzsche's Thucydides is not Thucydides. And so what I'm saying is that this entire discussion is not fundamentally indebted to Nietzsche or Thucydides read through the lens of Nietzsche. That's not what's going on here. I'm simply emphasizing the importance of Thucydides for as enormously influential a philosopher as Nietzsche. And you're going to immediately recognize why I have to provide that kind of qualification about Nietzsche on Thucydides because of how amazingly inflammatory Nietzsche is regarding Thucydides. Nietzsche comes out swinging, and it's immediately obvious why the full title of the text is Twilight of the Idols, or How to Philosophize with a Hammer, because Nietzsche is about to take a hammer to Plato, to Christians, to the very belief in something called the good, to idealism, to the Jews, and to the whole phenomenon of what we would otherwise call morality in the Western tradition. And he's going to do it in the name of Thucydides. And this is what he says. In the end, I have a deep distrust of Plato. I find him so much at odds with the basic Hellenic instincts, so moralistic, so proleptically Christian, he already has good as the highest concept, that I would just as soon refer to the whole Plato phenomena in harsh terms, like higher hoax, or, if you would prefer, idealism, than in any other way. We have paid a high price for the fact that this Athenian went to school with Egyptians, or with Jews in Egypt, I don't know. In the great disaster of Christianity, Plato represents that ambiguity and fascination called an ideal that made it possible for the nobler natures of antiquity to misunderstand themselves and to step out onto the bridge that leads to the cross. And how much Plato there still is in the concept of church and the structure, system, and practice of the church. My vacation, my preference, my cure for all things Platonic has always been Thucydides. Thucydides and perhaps Machiavelli's Prince. These are most closely related to me in terms of their unconditional will not to be fooled and to see reason in reality, not in reason, and even less in morality. Thucydides is the best cure for the classically educated young man who has carried away a horrible, whitewashed image of the ideal Greeks as the reward for his secondary school training. You have to turn Thucydides over, line by line, and read his ulterior motives as clearly as his words. There are few thinkers with so many ulterior motives. He represents the most perfect expression of the sophists' culture, by which I mean the realists' culture. This invaluable movement, right in the middle of the hoax of morals and ideals that was being perpetrated on all sides by the Socratic schools. Greek philosophy as the decadence of the Greek instinct. Thucydides as the great summation, the final manifestation of that strong, severe, harsh objectivity that lay in the instincts of the more ancient Hellenes. In the end, what divides natures like Thucydides from natures like Plato is courage in the face of reality. Plato is a coward in the face of reality. Consequently, he escapes into the ideal. Thucydides has self-control, and consequently, he has control over things as well. Okay, there is an enormous amount being said in those passages. In fact, it's nothing less than a rethinking of the entire Western philosophical tradition and understanding all the claims and the premises of the claims that come tumbling out from just that is why I'm doing an entire series on Nietzsche's masterpiece, Thus Spoke Zarathustra.